It's a somewhat controversial idea, but what they often tell screenwriters, especially screenwriters that work on, reality-based material, is never let the truth get in the way of a good story. Probably the best example of that is, in All the President's Men, nobody ever said follow the money, but that's now become sort of a catch-all phrase with which we use to describe what investigative journalists do. With someone like Catherine Bigelow, who I happen to think is a great filmmaker, whether or not the veracity of that movie got out there, it was the first movie to actually really have a return on box office that had to do with Iraq and Afghanistan veterans in the entire history of the war. There had been other movies that had come out, Home of the Brave, Stop Loss, The Dry Land. People have flirted with doing mass media entertainment. So for those of you who are spec screenwriters or screenwriters who are thinking about delving into this as a topic or researching this as a topic, it's an extraordinarily difficult hurdle to clear, because I think a lot of people don't look at these stories as entertainment. Yeah. And when you are a producer, or you're looking at the bottom line and saying, how is it that I can get somebody to pay $10 to come in and see my movie so that I can recoup my cost? Unless there's a John Wayne style, swaggering Jeremy Renner-esque hero, I don't know necessarily whether or not a mass audience is capable of digesting some of this stuff.
If these films were really good, people would go see them. And I push back on the one point that a lot of folks have brought up. You don't have to sensationalize what's happening in Iraq and Afghanistan. There's some pretty exciting, interesting, emotional, compelling stuff happening over there every single day. So there's no shortage of good content and good stories. I think that I was pretty vocal about that film, about Hurt Locker, because it was a time where it was nominated for the Academy Award. It became the focal point of a discussion, not just around film, but also around our experiences. And the reaction from our membership, and we've got about 100,000 members around the country, has been pretty consistent, and I think it reflects what I feel is that it really sensationalizes the hell out of the experience. It's not realistic. And that's the bottom line. And I think what was different about Hurt Locker is that a lot of folks were portraying it as though it was. There are films like Green Zone. Green Zone didn't try to be realistic. It was kind of Jason Bourne in Iraq. But many folks in the media and some folks associated with the film said, this is the real thing. And it's not. That's bullshit. And everybody who'd been on the ground, especially folks who had been EOD units, explosive ordnance disposal units, who actually dismantled bombs, knew that. Now, in the end, it won the Academy Award, and I think at least for a little bit it opened a discussion in Hollywood around the wars and around our issues, and that's a good thing. There is one scene when he's in the supermarket and he's trying to decide what cereal to buy after he'd come home from Iraq, the lead character, and that's a very powerful scene. That creates a very visceral connection. But I think the bottom line is that there's a lot of sloppiness. You can say getting uniforms wrong are not a big deal, but to our community, it's a big deal.
Dan Fung, I'm sorry to keep you on the end without throwing a question to you. The first one I'm going to give you is because you're a documentarian. What was your experience the first time you saw combat versus the combat that you had seen, on the television or on film screens?
Right. When I first went to Afghanistan, I was 24. I had this romantic, heroic view of what war was. And I think for thousands of years we've had that representation. We have these two conflicting ones. And this first one is where we have these heroes, we have these individuals that are above and beyond, that have honor and glory. And it's these stories we've been telling for a long time that portray this false mythical version of what war is. And I was so deeply influenced by movies from Hollywood that's what I thought war was. I didn't have any other sort of counterpoint to it. And when I first went there, a lot of the images I was making, I was working as a stills photographer, were trying to match that false representation. And it took me a long time to sort of process, well, why am I even making images like that? I have something that's real. And it took a long time to try to shake that Hollywood version, that's this glamorized, heroic version. And it was the work of photojournalists that I looked to really try to provide that more truthful, honest representation of war. So Don McCullen and James Nachtwey and Larry Burrows from Vietnam, Bosnia, Rwanda, and then Iraq and Afghanistan, these photographers have been able to give us a glimpse of what this more truthful, honest version of war looks like. And it's far more painful, there's much more suffering, and it doesn't fit with the Hollywood version. When I was shooting in Afghanistan, I had no intention of making a film. I just knew there was this significant operation in southern Afghanistan that was going to be decisive. It was the largest air assault since Vietnam. 4,000 Marines were being dropped into the Helmand River Valley, into this insurgent stronghold. And I just knew it was significant, and I had to cover it. And so I embedded with Echo Company 2-8 of the 2nd Marine Division as they were dropped 18 kilometers into this stronghold. And within a few hours of landing, we were surrounded and attacked on all sides. And the fighting lasted days and weeks onwards. And this is where I met Sergeant Harris, who I followed for a year. And he was this perfect leader. He was the one that was coordinating this battle, which focused on this pile of rubble that became known as Machine Gun Hill. And by the first day, 1 Marine was dead, a dozen had collapsed from heat exhaustion, and he passed me a bottle of water, and that's where I first met him. And I followed him for the days and weeks after that as they pushed further into this territory. And 6 months later, he was shot and nearly killed in an ambush, and he was medevaced back to the US. And I had no intention of making a film about coming home from war either. But it was when he was hurt and he invited me back to his hometown of Yadkinville, North Carolina, that I continued filming. And he would introduce me as this guy was over there with me. And instantly I was accepted into his rural Baptist community. And I essentially lived with him and his wife, Ashley, as he recovered from this gunshot injury and transitioned back into a society that had no connection to what he had just been through.
Tell me a little bit about your experiences making Generation Kill.
How I got involved with the series, a big portion of it has to do with Evan Wright. Evan Wright called me and said, Rudy, I need someone who's a good communicator that can link up with the writers and the director and producer and bring them on to Camp Pendleton and give them a familiar firing experience there with Marine Corps culture so that they do right by this story. So I take it to nth power. They come and see a selection process. They see us doing some close quarter combat in the kill houses. I put them through combat dive preschool called pre-scuba, and they get to see what it takes and how difficult it is, and also how committed, and that these young men are young men, and they're freaking going hard with all they got for an ideal. They don't even know what they're getting into, but it's just the ideal.
You know, David Simon is known as a television creator and a filmmaker for relying very heavily on using real people to kind of bolster the authenticity and the verisimilitude, if you guys will all excuse me for using the $5 word, of the work that he does. People point to the way that The Wire, and how that looks and how that feels, and that's representation of Baltimore as a good example, if not a controversial example. Did he get it right with Generation Kill?
He got a lot of things right with Generation Kill. The sound, the squawk on the radio, a lot of this he got right because he used us. He used myself, Eric Cucker, Jeff Carazelis, and then after we were done shooting, we went and did ADR and did lots of our sound work with our 5.56 and our 7.62 machine gun systems, assault rifles, close air support and such. We went to 29 Palms to record all these sounds for real. And would you agree, Paul, that really gets it? It's the little squawk and the sounds of 5.56 far away and then them close, right. and then those things were great. Also, since it's a lot longer, it's about 7 hours long, it gives you some more boredom and it gives you time to think about what's going on and feel what's going on.